Your Excellencies, thank you very much for this opportunity to share some of the key takeaways from the sessions we've had throughout the 3 days of Tana deliberations, discussions, and engagements. For most of the period, we looked at 5 major thematic areas. The first one had to do with unconstitutional change of government and the recurrent coup d'etats on the continent. And one of the issues that actually came out strongly in the discussions was the concern among all participants that the gains of democracy have been rolled back, and the emphasis on the need to rethink structures that actually may be leading to these issues, to the rise of, or the re-emergence of coups. And central to that was the question of leadership failures. And leadership failures on the continent and the agitation among the younger population who actually have a lot of potentials, but in many cases have also been excluded from the system. And within that context, the first day in which we had the tribute to the late President Kenneth Kaunda and his values-based leadership system provides us that background to think about how to rethink leadership within the African continent in order to make it work. The next issue that actually came up was about the impact of global insecurity on the continent. And from the conversations, one thing that came up was the consensus that truly the socioeconomic impact of the Russian-Ukraine war is being felt across Africa in relation to food security, energy security, and all of that. But then, most importantly, one point that came out of it was also the need to reform the multilateral system, because there was a call on Africa, or it really brought up the issue of where Africa lies within the global system, the global order, and how much what happens within that system affects Africa. So the call to restructure the system in a way that actually addresses African interests was also brought up. Issues around the issue of climate change, preparedness and adaptation, and as well as financing was also discussed. And a point that came up as well was about desecuritizing climate risks and emphasizing resilience-based approaches that focus on protecting basic human needs, such as infrastructure, drinking water, and environmentally friendly policies in a sustainable manner. Also, there was also the consensus around frameworks of environmental disaster management that should be multi-sectoral and decentralized in such a way that it moves from the local areas, from the center down to the local people in the communities who actually are immediately affected by some of the environmental shocks. And in that light, capacity building and funding that would help, especially first-line responders in the community, to be able to adequately engage with climate extreme events that happen within their context was also discussed and agreed upon. On the topic around harnessing Africa's cultural heritage for resilience and integration, one point that also resonated across the discussions from the VC dialogues down to the discussions this morning was that culture shapes every aspect of our responses, our development, our behaviors, some of our choices and how leadership is also structured. So it becomes very important to promote cultural diversity and harness cultural richness within the continent, and the need to integrate general history of Africa in school curriculum, because the idea that most African youth are beginning to look outside for a bit of just their identity is not the way to go. And so looking back or bringing African history back to school and helping to mold the next generation of leaders would be very useful. And the last point on that also has to do with looking at Africa not from the lens of the past, but from the lens of the present and the future, in terms of building the next generation of leaders who are confident about being Africans, who are proud also of being African, and who have the mental and physical capacities to carry on the legacies and what is required to be African. On the taking stock of Africa, the continental peace and security landscape, there was an emphasis on the need to reinvigorate the Tana Forum, to deepen dialogues, the dialogues that are actually being held here, even if it means engaging with difficult questions, some of the questions that may not have been engaged with over the past 3 days. It becomes important to deal with them, to bring them up, because the opportunity that this Tana Forum provides is one in which there will be robust engagement, and where you do not have that opportunity to do it, it becomes important to look at it again and revisit some aspects of it just to deepen the conversations. And I think central again is revisiting the concept or the ideas of multilateralism and where Africa is, and the importance of Africa's position in the world, and Africa being given that position, being allowed to live, to demonstrate its place in the world order. And finally, I think the last point here has to do with the greater synergy between governance and security pillars and the frameworks of the African Union working together in driving peace and security on the continent. I will stop here. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much to our rapporteur, who was alert throughout this process, who was with us, who has managed to capture all the important things that were said and done. Before I call on His Excellency President Mahama to come and give us the closing remarks, I want to take a moment to thank the Tana Secretariat and the IPSS Secretariat, without whom 10 years of Tana's success would not have been possible. So I call on you to please give them a hand, but I also call on the Secretariat. I know you're in the room. Please, let's put faces to the names, please. The Tana Secretariat. The Tana. And we have a small thank you to the Secretariat for the successes and for their effort and their time, so that you know, if you got your ticket on time, if your email was replied to at 4 in the morning, your room was changed, your agenda got here on time, there were people who were behind it. Your Excellency, I call on you to cut this cake with the Tana Secretariat and the Technical Committee for their dedication, 10 years of successes. The Tana board who are here with us. Sorry? Thank you. A big thank you to the head of the Secretariat this year, Miss Letty, who's here with us. Letty, please wave. Letty, please wave so we can see you. Thank you. Who's been with us? Thank you. Thank you so much. So we are now coming to the final end of what has been a very engaging 2.5 days. And I cannot add, I cannot take away from anything that was said. But I want to thank you all, our participants, for staying here with us, for keeping the conversation going, for engaging, for picking up on what was said and taking it to the corridors, and for reminding us on what Tana really is. And we take it on board as a Tana Technical Committee and the Secretariat, and our board is here. We hear you. We want the conversations to be more productive, more engaging, and more fruitful. So we thank you so much. And on that note, before one last thing, I forgot to acknowledge just one person, one of our nominees, who's also his birthday and a big contributor to the African space, Professor Tim Murithi. Please, Professor Murithi. We are afraid to ask you how old you are or how young you are. I was told in Africa, once you reach 50, you no longer ask people how old you are, you say, how young are you? So we're not sure, should we ask you how old or how young? Where do you fall? How middle-aged are you? Fantastic. Thank you so much. So with that, Your Excellency, over to you for final closing of the session. I thank you.
Indeed, gratitude goes to all of you. Just before I read out our appreciation and thanks, let me acknowledge two young women here. They've been with us all these days. They are AU Youth Envoys. We have Cynthia Chigwenya. Are you here? Yeah, good. Thanks for coming, and thanks for joining us. And we have Ms. Darren Chundo. Good. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you very much. Let me congratulate Tana Forum again for a successful 10th anniversary forum, and to thank our Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Mohammed, for taking time off to join us and personally open the forum yesterday. We want to thank the Prime Ministers, Heads of State, Vice Presidents who were able to travel and join us for this 10th anniversary forum. I want to particularly thank also the Presidents of the Federal Supreme Court of Justice of Ethiopia, Madam Miaza Ashinafi. Unfortunately, she just left, but she's been with us from the first day at just a few hours ago. She's got to catch her flight back to Addis. Let me reiterate our thanks to Letty and the Tana Secretariat and the IPSS for the very efficient backstopping you have given for such a successful forum. I want to thank you for all the backroom work that you have been undertaking, the sleepless nights, to be able to make this forum a success. I want to acknowledge our board. Unfortunately, former Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn has had to leave us, but he's one of our very active board members. Professor PLO Lumumba is also one of our active board members. I acknowledge you. He took us off on a flying start with that Kaunda lecture, and we want to thank you and your panelists, Kaunda's granddaughter. We thank you for coming and paying such wonderful tribute to your grandfather, and Professor Shisua. We want to thank you too for that wonderful expose. We have Ambassador Shalabi, who's been a long-standing member of the board. We acknowledge you. Thank you very much for the very hard work you have put in to make this a success. And Her Excellency Catherine Samba-Panza, former President of the Central African Republic, we want to thank you and acknowledge you. We thank the President of the Amhara region for the warm hospitality we've enjoyed since we came here. This is a very beautiful location, and we're happy that it continues to be the home of Tana. In one of the board meetings, when the conflict that has been ongoing was at its peak. We were wondering whether Tana could come to its home location, or we might have to vary it and perform this forum in Addis. Happily, we have come to a very peaceful Bahir Dar, beautiful city, very green, and I hope that we're going to go back to our communities and plant more trees so that we can replicate Bahir Dar in all our countries. I want to thank all the participants for the intense and frank discussions that we have had in the spirit of Tana. Tana is the foremost platform for discussions on African peace and security, and it creates the opportunity for frank and candid discussion. No holds barred. People are free to bring on board any thoughts that they have without any censorship. And so I want to thank all of you for coming to participate and for the frank discussions that we have had in the spirit of Tana. As you know, the emblem of Tana is a Baobab tree. And so anytime you see this symbol, it is a symbol of the African Baobab tree. And what does the African Baobab tree represent? It normally is in the center of the village. And anytime important decisions are to be taken about the village, that is where the elders gather. And so Tana is our Baobab tree, and we will always gather here to talk about issues of peace and security. I want to thank our sponsors, the German government, and specifically GIZ, for the continuous support that they have been giving to Tana. Want to thank the Blue Nile Resort, where this program has taken place. Want to thank Ethiopian Airlines for transporting all our participants here to Bahir Dar safely. I had the privilege to present the State of Peace and Security in Africa report. And unfortunately, it's a gloomy picture. We have unconstitutional changes of government. We have a regression of democracy. We have regionalization of conflict in various regions of Africa. And I believe that it is a call to action, and that we as Africans must put in more strenuous effort to ensure sustainable peace and security on the continent. Tana is not just a talk shop, and this is not the end of the discussion. We always have outcomes at the end of the forum, and so it is my hope that you visit the Tana Forum website, because there are various outputs that we're going to put there. We're going to put the summary of the VC's dialogue. For those of you who joined us at Bahir Dar University, we had a very wonderful dialogue there with the vice chancellors and the academia. We're going to put that on the website. We're going to put the summary of our Mele Zenawi lecture series, which was very kindly undertaken by Professor Shisua and the granddaughter of Kenneth Kaunda. We're going to have the whole State of Peace and Security in Africa report on the website. Indeed, it's on the website already. And so I just gave a summary of the 60-page document. For those of you who want the additional detail, you can go through the document. We're going to post 8 policy papers, coming mainly from the different sessions that we held, and giving takeaways and additional recommendations on the various subject areas that we talked about. We're going to publish the essays of the 3 young people here who won the award for the best essays, and so it will be on our website. We're going to produce a video which summarizes what happened here over the last 3 days, and that would also be put on the website. For those of you who were called to do interviews, we're going to edit your interviews and also put them up on the website. And we'll have a pictorial storyboard of all the photos that we're taking. And so there are many outcomes that we'll put out as time goes on. We have accepted the feedback that we got, and I mentioned with the young people, the feedback we got from the young people, that we involve the youth more in the activities of Tana. At the next board meeting, we'll discuss it and see how we can bring in some more programs that involve the young people. We also take the feedback from one of the participants who said they want us to increase the dialogue so that it's not just the presentations by the resource people, but they want more discussions amongst participants. And so we'll look at the program as it is and we will adjust it accordingly so that we can have more interactive sessions and have enough time. I'll urge all of you to kindly fill the evaluation forms. They're very helpful to us in terms of fine-tuning the forum. And as you walked in, each of you was given an evaluation form. If you can fill it before you go, just leave it with the secretariat. If you're not able, you can always mail it back to us, and we will take your feedback seriously. And so on this note, we have come to the end of the 10th anniversary Tana Forum. And I wish all of you who came a very safe journey back. And it is my hope that next year at the 11th forum, we will see most of you here again. And so thank you very much, and may God take you back home safely. Thank you.